Hi, this is Maya Maida, and you're listening to the Food Solidarity Podcast, conversations with people around the world who are using the power of food to create local change. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of the Food Solidarity Podcast. Today we'll be speaking with Paola Pollmeier. Paola is the founder of Platos and Fronteras in Medelln, Colombia. Platos and Fronteras is an organization that is using social gastronomy practices in vulnerable communities to address malnutrition, food waste, and social inequities. Hi, Paola, and welcome, and congratulations on being a recipient of the fund and the very first speaker we have on this podcast series.
Hi Maya, how are you?
I'm doing
Thank you
well.
for inviting us to the session.
Oh, absolutely, Paula. It's our pleasure to have you on. Welcome. For my first question, I just want to ask you, when was the first time you realized that food was a tool for addressing some of the most pressing social and economic disparities, crises, and problems that our world is facing today? Um, and how does that inspire your work at Platos and Fronteras?
Yeah, so my first connection with it, that I really became conscious around it, was when I started to work with the municipality of Medelln, like here in Colombia. Before I was not really that conscious around it. I was like eating what was tasty in a way. And I realized and then got involved in all this when I started to volunteer in a community, in a vulnerable community here in Medellin. And it started with conversations with community leaders where they were like, okay, we would love to learn how to cook. And when we started to talk about food and about the role of food in their lives, I realized what the actually conditions were in that community. And that's where my whole journey started as well. So I kind of like transformed my eating habits and all that while I'm with the community. I learned from them, and they learned from the network I was able to connect to them. So yeah, it's like 4 years ago, approx.
Tell us a bit about the space which Platos and Fronteras operates, and what is your role as founder of the organization? What role do you play in the communities that you work in?
Um, so yeah, first of all, like my role, like from the beginning, is more like a connecting role, and fostering collaboration, because it's not that I'm transferring knowledge. Like what I started to do is I created this public private civic network, um, which I incentivized in a way to support. So we started in bringing chefs to the communities to transfer their knowledge around more conscious eating, more conscious cooking, and that's how it all started. So and in the end, a lot of chefs even connected directly with the community, and they were like continuing their work with them. So I'm just like more the space creator and the connector, that in the beginning, and then it started to become more that women wanted to get more involved. They were like, I want to actually have my little business around food. And that's where I started to even get like public institutions involved, to support in certifying them in food manipulation and so on. So my role at the moment, and still is like connection, creating connections, bringing people together. And that's why we are also called Plates Without Borders, because it's about really breaking those borders down, or these walls down.
Incredible. The world needs more great connectors, and people who build bridges between spaces and realities, I think. So thank you for that. Since the Food Solidarity Fund was designed to really support those organizations that are serving meals, can you tell us a little bit about your emergency food aid response and um, what how you've been serving these communities during the COVID-19 crisis.
Okay. Yeah, so in the beginning it was, as I told you, like it was about like transferring knowledge mainly, right? So it was not that much about handing over food to the communities. So what we wanted to create was like a community which like fosters resilience, which brings different community members together around food. That's why we have like those first two pillars, which is like in our model, it's about connection and education. And and that's what we still do. The education pillar is really about like giving you the tools so you can start manipulating food and like cook for others. And then in the third pillar we have is like really thinking about how can we use the skills we learned to achieve or to generate income. So what we have been doing is that we have been creating experiences which we were selling to tourism agencies, to institutions, to companies, where the women were the teachers from them, like showing them new dishes, new plates to prepare, like transferring the knowledge they achieved in our program to others. And through that, we generated income, and we're paying those women to generate, yeah, to support them in making their living and like improving the quality of life. During the crisis, and I think that was like the question, we are focusing on delivering food, but it's not only focused on just focused on energies and calories. It's really about how can we keep that connection to consciousness and like delivering healthy and nourishing food for our families. And that's what we do with different organizations who work with local farmers. We have an alliance and partnership with the municipality, with the local farmers market, which right now is not open, but they connect the farmers directly to us, and we connect the food from them and the markets to the community. So that was our main focus at the moment, like to really focus on bringing fresh farmers, local farmers markets to the people who most, and to the families mainly who most need it right now.
Amazing. And so I'm sure that many organizations right now are kind of being forced to rethink how they typically operate, especially during the coronavirus. What are some of the challenges that you're facing that either are global challenges right now or specifically local in the face of the pandemic?
Well, the biggest challenge in the beginning was that I couldn't go to the community anymore with our team, and we couldn't gather anymore. Platos in Fronteras, like the heart is being together in workshops, communicating, cooking together. So that I think most of us had to like face that challenge. And then the other thing is that, and then the second challenge, if you can't gather anymore, was about connectivity. So how do I reach community members if they're not connected, if they don't have internet, if I can't communicate with them, right? So that was like the first phase, like kind of like really figuring out what would be the best communication channel to stay in touch with them. And then it was mainly about how to deliver as fast as possible meals and food to the people, to the most needed. And how do I actually define who are the most needed? That was also really interesting. Like, and there it was again like a call to this co-creation pillar, which is like the only people who can tell us are the people who are in the community. So it's about this really strong collaboration with community leaders to guide us and which families to support with the donations and the aid which comes in.
Right.
So yeah, like you were talking about local challenges. I think it's connectivity, and it's about finding really efficient ways on delivering food to the most needed, and not to the people who might gonna take advantage of that support.
Absolutely. I feel like that is always a challenge, as even if you're in this space, maybe every once in a while, but not permanently in that space. It's like, how do you understand that context? And yeah, I mean, it's not an easy thing to identify need, I think, and that is something that's often overlooked in a lot of international development, is that when there's a need, that's great. And that's, you know, something like food, like people really are hungry to try to figure out, you know, if maybe that help will be taken advantage of, or maybe not utilized in the way that it was intended to be. And I can't imagine, I'm sure it's much harder now, especially when you can't go into the community at all.
And it's much harder now as well, because I mean, in Colombia, we have the situation that almost like 40% are not formally employed, right? So they're like living in the informality. And we have so many people who lost their jobs. So how do you then categorize who is in most need if most of those formal workers, they were living like day to day, right? So it's difficult. It's very difficult to assign it to one family, but to the other family you don't. But you know that in the end, everyone is in need.
Right.
So it hasn't been easy. So what we have been trying to do is, trying to like deliver food to as many families as possible, because there was in the beginning the idea to constantly like support one family, and we did that. Like there were some families who got like 2 times or 3 times aid, but then we said, okay, like let's now really spread and try to benefit as many as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And so those are very local challenges, but in what way is being part of like a global network like SGM, does that offer you like support in kind of your day-to-day in dealing with these day-to-day challenges? Like, do you find inspiration from other organizations who maybe face similar challenges, though in their own unique local context?
Well, I'm already, like with Platos in Fronteras, we're already part of SGM since 3 years. Like I already know them since their summit they did in Brazil. And since then I have been participating to the first summit. One of our team members went, and then she came back and was like, we have to be part of this, because like all the organizations that I met were so inspiring. And that's where I was like, okay, then it's definitely worth it to keep going there. And the main driver for us to be part of the movement is inspiration, and kind of like feeling that we're not alone on the journey. So whenever I'm in a webinar, or whenever I connect with another organization which is doing something similar, and I know that I can get back to them. Like a while ago, I was in a session where there was an organization which is focusing also on nutrition knowledge transfer. And I did this beautiful book for children, and I was like, oh, we need this, you know? And she was like, I'm happy to share it. Like, you can adapt it to your local, like integrate local stories and so on, but the methodology and the storytelling is similar. And I was like, wow, great, you know? And also we got in contact through SGM with an activist and chef, which is Charles Michel. And when I found the profile through SGM, I'm like, oh, like let me ask him, because he's French Colombian, and he supported us in the Farm to the Plate campaign we did with the municipality. So I'm feeling that I feel much more connected with organizations which are doing something very similar to us. And I think that's more or less it, that you have this support network. And that's what I feel when I talk about SGM as Platos sin Fronteras.
So as you mentioned before, you were this kind of co-creator, space provider, collaborator, and this is really key to your role in Platos sin Fronteras. But it's important to note that while your organization is one of the initial 10 to receive grants from the Food Solidarity Fund, you also play an interesting role as a community lead for the social gastronomy movement. So, what are you doing to ensure that other organizations can really make the most out of this opportunity, um, whether it be mentorship, exchanging best practices, running workshops? What's going on there?
Um, so I feel already connected because I have been following on social media, like who was selected, and I kind of like looked at them, and we're all approaching the same challenge. We're all trying to like minimize as much as possible food insecurity in our cities or in our region, and so I feel very much connected to them. And I can't wait to meet them all and to kind of like what I feel. It's like, okay, we're going to have 2 months or 3 months where we're going to be executing the fund, and the idea is like probably to support each other, to share stories. If someone is looking for support from a food bank, how do I do it? Like those are all things I'm trying to prepare right now. And I also got really inspired by one of the members who has a project which is called Food for All, Comida para Todos, and by a mentor which actually selected the organizations, which is NAS, who has the Migrant Kitchen in New York. And I had some conversations with them, and one of them was like, you need a physical space. Like, don't, do have a physical space where you can inspire others, where community leaders can come to. And like those little triggers already change something in how I'm going to be approaching the strategy, right? I got inspired by the presentation from Comida para Todos, like how they set it all up. So so I really hope that with that support network, I can like achieve the highest impact possible for our community.
Incredible. Yeah, I really think that the power here does lie in that connection and that ability to hear different perspectives and then, take that into consideration to really scale your local impact. And I think this is going to be really beautiful, and hopefully at the end of this 3 months, everybody will feel that they're not alone in this journey, that they have a whole community, a whole global community of people who have their back and are willing to be there with advice and support at any moment. On that note and that spirit of collaboration, I'd like to introduce Alejandra Bautista, this communications intern from the social gastronomy movement. Ale is located in Bogota, Colombia, and I'm bringing her in today to ask you some questions, Paula, that are maybe more, can provide us with some more local context. So without any further ado, welcome Ali, welcome to the show, and I'll leave you to it.
Hi, Maya. Hi, Paola. Thank you so much for having me, for the opportunity to be here. Really excited. I was very looking forward to ask you some Colombian related questions. And the first one is, how was the very first experience bringing Plantas Sin Fronteras ideas into Moravia and the comunas?
Our first experience was actually, I think it was like in my volunteering work, I was working with some German architects who were intervening a space in the community. They were like creating a community gathering place. And I was going to do a co-creation workshop with the community leaders to identify their needs, like what did they want to do in that space. And that's where we identified that what would be beautiful is to start cooking together and to learn new recipes. That was the initial need the community leaders expressed to us, or to me. And that's when I kind of like started to observe more and more, like what is the food offer in the community, what do people like to cook. And that's how I started to actually get from my first time involved into food insecurity terms. I didn't even know what food insecurity was, actually. So I was like starting like 4 years ago, like to really get to know and learn more about that concept. So yeah, and then it was really about looking for partners in the community, like as a community center. I started to contact chefs, and I was like, would you like to give a workshop for us and show us some new recipes? And that's how it all started.
Great, awesome. And why Moravia? Like, how did you choose? Why did you choose it as your first place to start?
I think it's a little bit about what just happens. Like I worked to that time. I was still employed to that time with the innovation center of the city. So I worked like for 4 years for the municipality of Medellin, and that innovation center is located in the north of the city, which is low income communities, and it's a conflict area in a way. And since it was so close to Ruta Ene, um, I was much more like, closer and more related into what I was doing with that community, and plus my volunteering was in that community, so it was a lot about around like a personal contact with the women I met, who nowadays are friends as well, and uh, big co-creators of the strategy. Like without them, this wouldn't exist. And that's why we chose Moravia. And then what happened is that I started to look into numbers, and I realized that it was one of the communities with highest food insecurity levels, more than 75%. So I was like, okay, like I'm definitely going to be focusing and keep focusing on Moravia.
Mhm.
Now we already like went to other communities, Comuna 8 and Comuna 13, which some of you might know if you have been a tourist in Medellin. Most of the people go to Comuna 13 because it was a very conflictive comuna, which nowadays is like the municipality created an electric stairs there, and did different interventions to connect the communities and to create more resilience. And now it's not anymore because of the crisis, but it's a tourist hotspot in Medellin.
Right, and I was about to ask you as well. You guys did like a gastro tour in Moravia, like earlier this year.
Yeah.
How did that idea came out?
Oh yeah, it was about like so once we had more than 30 women who got certified in food manipulation and had like workshops all the time, and they were getting really, it was really, we got really well in this, and then we were thinking about how can we create income for us, through food, through gastronomy. And then we said, okay, like let's connect tourism with gastronomy, and let's do tours, but not like to get to know like the community itself. It was more about like, let's do a little tour and show and create like food stations, where the women were already like selling food, and they were like showing salsas or different stuff they have learned, and we're selling it. So we did the tour, we went to those different stations, and in the end we got to that community place where we have a mobile kitchen there, thanks to the German architects who have this project there, Urban Lab Medellin Berlin it's called. And then we gave a workshop to those tourists around healthy cooking recipes. So the women transferred the knowledge to tourists and people who have never been in the community. So it was very interesting to connect gastronomy with tourism. And that was one of our first questions, like since we started, was like, okay, once we learn about it, like for women who love gastronomy and want to learn more, like why don't like identify and support them, and even making a living out of it. So yeah, so that was when that tour was born, and we actually called it, because we were part of the network, we called it Social Gastronomy Tour. So we didn't call it Platos y Fronteras Tour, we called it Social Gastronomy Tour. And we had more than 12 participants. So we sold 12 tickets in a way, and we paid all the women, and we paid the food, and we had some additional income to keep supporting our social work. So yeah, and then we had to
That's
stop
beautiful.
the crisis. Yeah,
I think it also ties with education, like what you guys are doing for these women. And I would also like to know, how do you see food as a tool for peace in a place like Colombia, in a place like Medellin, for example? How do you feel like those two things can do an impact and transform society?
I think it's one of the main tools I would always use. You know, like cooking together and eating together. because once you are in the kitchen, it doesn't matter where you're from, right? Like you have a recipe and you start cooking together, and it's this one purpose, and everyone kind of gathers around it. And that's where conversations come up, and that's where we're sharing like special moments together. And I think it's a very important resilience tool, food, cooking, because we're doing it 3 times a day in a way, and it's a beautiful opportunity, either in my nucleus, in my family, to get together, and that's very often where we fail. Where we don't, like, we're not getting together anymore for that big family meal, you know, like people eat in front of the computer or in front of the television. There's only one person responsible, which most of the times is the mother who prepares the meal. So I think it's about really using food to gather again, and to communicate, and to talk with each other in our families. And then if we have those programs as Platos in Fronteras and as other programs, to how can I gather my community through food together, and to really exchange and create those networks again. And just to complement, thanks to this community events and this cooking together, we created such a strong network that in the end, the women were the responsibles to hand over food. Like, I was just a connector. I was like bringing the money in and bringing the food in, but who selected the beneficiaries and who was handing over were the women who felt part of Platos in Fronteras, of this network. So yeah, I think it's a beautiful tool for peace.
Okay, I was also wondering about the work that Diego Benitez is doing with Siembra Viva. Could you tell us a little bit about it, and how are they working with local farmers? And that would be my last question for you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so Diego, we connected with because we wanted to deliver fresh, organic food to the most, because right now, like, one of our main challenges is not to get sick, right? Like, to have a really strong immune system. And I got to know Diego through former work, which I had in the municipality, and I admire his work so much because he's doing education processes for farmers. He's supporting them and showing them more about regenerative agriculture. So he shows them how they can grow food in a very sustainable way. And our decision to work with Siembra Viva was because we were like, we want to support local farmers, we want to support sustainability, like like incentivize people to grow organically, and we want to deliver to our communities the best food possible. And that's where we started to work together. So one, like a donation which you give to Platos, it's not only that we're handing meals and markets over to the most vulnerable, but it's also, we're like fostering local farming and fostering the beautiful work of Siembra Viva, which has the social purpose. They are a company, but they are social. They're a company with a social purpose, and that's why this alliance started, and that's also why we started from the farm to the plate concept or campaign. Where we then started to work with the municipality first, but now the second season, we want to even foster our engagement and our collaboration with Siembra Viva.
Thank you so much for coming on, Ali. Those questions were fantastic, and it's really great to have your perspective here. So thank you. You're amazing.
Thank you. Both of you, Aleja and Maya. Thank you.
I have one last, and it's a big question. It's all encompassing, and it's a bit of an imagination exercise. So let's imagine it's 2030, and all of the UN Sustainable Development Goals have been accomplished, including zero hunger and zero poverty. In your head, what does the food system look like? And what was your role in getting it to that point?
Well, I think that if I could dream for 2030, I would love to see more permaculture. I would love to see people who live in communities, like families who live in communities and who grow their own food and who grow their own foods and share their knowledge with others in a way. I love actually your question, because most of the time the questions are around what happens if something is not accomplished. Now the question around what happens if we have accomplished the Sustainable Development Goals until 2030, which right now a reality is that anything is on track at the moment, especially when we talk about food insecurity. We're completely off track. Like obesity is rising, people are getting more and more sick. We have a pandemic and another pandemic, not only coronavirus, it's we're getting sick from the food we're eating. But if I dream, I wish we would live in other sustainable communities where we grow our own food and where we share our knowledge with each other around the table. So that's what I dream, that we become much more auto sustainable in a way, and that we're not like that dependent on others.
Yeah, this is also my dream. I hope that one day we just have pockets of little self-sustainable communities everywhere that are all, living in harmony with the earth and using permaculture techniques. I think it's really interesting. I actually had a professor, his name's Christopher London, who used to always talk about how basically in order to move towards a more sustainable future, we almost need to revert back to peasant farming techniques that are old, ancient techniques. And really that's what permaculture is, and that's what agroforestry is. And you have this, you could have so much more diversity and so much more nutrition in a little tiny square garden than even you could have with like a massive monoculture fields that are producing, these identical looking tomatoes that that are sold, basically looking like red balls, just not.
Yeah, and it's a paradox that a farmer has land and he has not the food to survive from it, right? And even farmers who tell us, I'm not going to eat that tomato because I know what I put on it. And I'm like, wow, okay, like, they don't consume their own food, and that can't be. That's not sustainable at all. So I love what you just mentioned, that we need to get back to those ancient techniques. We have to get back and connect again with nature. Like if I could dream, I would have like wilderness schools all over, like children getting courses and getting taught in the woods, in the forest, and just like getting back to nature, and that's what we completely lost, especially in the cities.
Absolutely. And if anything, the pandemic has shown that how unsustainable city life is right now, and how really when you take away all of the benefits of, living close to work and taking public transportation and, being in a convenient location, none of that really seems to matter anymore. And what really feels like it matters is that connection to nature, and that ability to kind of say, okay, if all of the trucks stopped delivering to my local grocery store next week, I wouldn't starve, and that's kind of a question I think we all, at least when I first learned about the coronavirus and how it was, I was really nervous about that, especially being in like, an area in Brazil where it's not uncommon that truck drivers go on strike, or, distribution is halted for some reason. And I think the first thing I did was start, taking leeks and any vegetables I could regrow and putting them in water glasses around my kitchen and then planting them outside in the garden. And I've always been interested in regenerative agriculture, but I think that that really pushed it into the forefront for me that, wow, we really have to take food into our own hands now and stop relying on this kind of hidden system that exists without us knowing what goes on and knowing what goes into it. So super interesting.
I agree. Yeah, and I think one dream is really to connect again the urban lifestyle with the land. And I don't know, like there's so little you need to actually be happy, and very often, like, there are some farmers like make it possible to have your own land where you can grow your food and where you can like live with your family in peace. And that's something, right? Like, and right now it's a trend, like everything what you were just mentioning right now, it's this process of awakening, right? And even if it's very difficult right now for a lot of people, it's also like it has been a process of waking up and getting more conscious and trying to reconnect in a way, to reconnect. So yeah, I just really enjoyed what you just said, like the process of awakening.
Yeah, absolutely. And in a time when, we all feel very alone, we can rest like assured knowing that we're not alone in that. And that I think the fact that it's a trend, well, trend has kind of a negative connotation. It's like a really good thing because it's a positive trend. It's a trend that I hope everybody continues and never goes out of fashion, So, and I think that one beauty of this fund too, and organizations like you, is not only for connecting with each other, but also connecting with people who are starting to see that in their own lives.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
I really enjoyed talking to you, and thank you so much for being here. And thank you to Ale for really just jumping in and first, feet first to the Food Solidarity podcast here. And I really appreciate you. I'm so happy that you were our first interviewee. So congratulations.
Thank you, Maya.
Congratulations again on receiving the Food Solidarity Fund. I really so happy for you, and I can't wait to see all of the beautiful things that are going to come from Platos and Fronteras and SGM in the next couple of years. So I think we can work towards that future, that beautiful future we both.
We will, Maya. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think it's beautiful, and I can't wait to listen to the others. And if you need anything else, just let me know. And yeah, and then we talk.
Amazing. Amazing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Ciao.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to the Food Solidarity Podcast. Over the next 10 weeks, we'll be sharing more stories from organizations around the world who are using the power of food to create local change. If you're interested in learning more about the social gastronomy movement, the Food Solidarity Fund, or the work of Platos Sin Fronteras, visit www.socialgastronomy.org. Thanks!